The three alien observers stood motionless behind their invisible shield, watching the busy human military medical facility with growing confusion. Their long fingers moved quickly across their data tablets, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The lead observer, Blue, kept shifting his large eyes between different scenes playing out in front of him. "This makes no sense," Blue muttered, his antenna twitching with frustration. The one they call Doc holds no command rank, yet everyone follows his words without question. The morning had started normally enough. The Galactic Council's observation team had set up their hidden post near the facility's main entrance, expecting to document typical military hierarchy in action. Instead, they had witnessed something that went against everything they understood about command structures. They watched as a high-ranking officer, someone they identified as a colonel based on their research, step aside and change his orders when the gray-haired man in a white coat simply shook his head and pointed in a different direction. The colonel didn't argue. He didn't demand respect. He simply nodded and redirected his troops. "Perhaps our translation devices are malfunctioning," suggested Green, the youngest observer. "Maybe Doc is actually a supreme rank we don't understand." Blue checked their equipment for the 10th time that morning. "No, everything works perfectly." Their word Doc is simply short for doctor, a medical professional. According to our research, they rank far below military commanders in their chain of command. Their confusion only grew as they continued watching. A group of young soldiers came running up to the building, carrying an injured companion. A high-ranking sergeant was barking orders, but the moment the gray-haired doctor stepped out, everyone fell quiet. The doctor didn't raise his voice. He didn't show any signs of authority that the aliens recognized. He simply started giving directions, and everyone, including the sergeant, moved exactly as he indicated. "Record this," Blue ordered, his inner eyelids blinking rapidly in distress. "The council needs to see how these humans ignore proper authority structures." They watched as the doctor organized the group efficiently, getting the injured soldier inside while simultaneously directing others to clear paths, fetch supplies, and contact specific departments. Not once did he show any military credentials. Not once did anyone question his right to give these instructions. The truly baffling part came when a young private figured out a better way to carry the medical supplies and quietly suggested it to the doctor. In alien military structures, such behavior would be unthinkable, a lower rank suggesting anything to a superior. But the doctor smiled, nodded, and immediately adopted the private's suggestion, even praising him for the idea. "This violates every principle of military order," Green said, his color shifting slightly with anxiety. "How can they function like this? Where is the respect for rank? The clear chain of command?" Their tablets chimed with an incoming priority message from the council. Other observation teams had reported similar incidents at different human medical facilities. This wasn't an isolated case. It was apparently a standard human practice. As the day continued, they saw more examples. The doctor, who they learned was called Doc Miller by most, smoothly directed people of all ranks. Sometimes he did it with just a gesture or a raised eyebrow. The amazing part was how people anticipated his needs, jumping to help before he even finished explaining what he wanted. "Look at that." Red, the third observer, pointed to a new scene. A general, one of the highest-ranking officers they'd seen, had just entered the facility. According to every rule the aliens knew, everyone should defer to his authority. Instead, they watched in shock as Doc Miller calmly told the general to wait his turn for a non-emergency examination. Even more shocking, the general actually smiled and took a seat in the waiting area. "We need to study this further," Blue decided, making notes furiously. "This Doc rank seems to operate outside normal command structures. It's as if they've created a separate authority system based on something we don't yet understand." As the sun began to set, the observation team packed up their equipment, their minds swimming with questions. They had come to study human military structure, expecting to find a system similar to their own. Instead, they had discovered something that threatened to shake the very foundation of how they understood authority and command. What they didn't realize was that this was just the beginning. Their discovery of the unusual power of Doc would soon ripple through the entire Galactic Council, challenging thousands of years of rigid hierarchical tradition. Observer Smith sat in his cramped monitoring pod, watching the screens with intense focus. The Galactic Council had chosen him for this special assignment because of his reputation for detailed analysis. After the initial observation team's disturbing reports about the human Doc phenomenon, the Council needed answers. Unlike the previous team, Smith had been authorized to install micro-cameras throughout the medical facility. He watched Dr. Miller's activities from multiple angles, trying to understand how this simple medical professional commanded such authority without any official power. Day 15 of observation, Smith recorded in his log. The subject continues to display unusual influence over military personnel of all ranks. He paused the recording as something caught his attention on one of the screens. A young nurse was arguing with a major about moving some medical supplies. The major was insisting they needed the space for new weapon storage. According to all proper protocols, the major's rank should have ended the discussion immediately. But then Doc Miller walked into the frame. He didn't yell. He didn't pull rank. He simply walked up, listened for a moment, then pointed to some medical charts on the wall. The major looked, nodded slowly, and within minutes was helping the nurse reorganize the space to keep the medical supplies exactly where they were. Smith rewound and replayed the scene 3 times. Note for analysis, he added to his log. Subject appears to lead through information sharing rather than direct commands. As he continued watching, Smith noticed patterns emerging. When Doc Miller walked through the halls, people naturally moved to let him pass, not out of fear, but with small smiles and quick greetings. When emergencies happened, everyone looked to him first, even if higher-ranking officers were present. The most puzzling incident came during lunch break. Smith watched as Doc Miller sat in the cafeteria, and soldiers of various ranks chose to join his table. They talked, laughed, and shared stories. Such mixing of ranks would have been strictly forbidden in any Galactic Council facility. This defies all military logic, Smith muttered to himself, his antenna curling in frustration. How can they maintain order without clear separation of ranks? His thoughts were interrupted by a commotion on the main screen. A shuttle had crashed just outside the facility. Smith watched in amazement as Doc Miller took control of the situation. He directed colonels and privates with equal authority, organizing rescue teams and medical responses. Nobody questioned his instructions or demanded to see his credentials. Most surprising was how Doc Miller handled a suggestion from a young mechanic about better ways to reach people trapped in the shuttle. Instead of punishing the lower-ranked individual for speaking out of turn, Doc Miller immediately adapted his plan to include the mechanic's ideas. Additional note, Smith recorded, his voice tight with confusion. Subject appears to value useful input regardless of its source. This contradicts all known effective military structures. Later that day, Smith observed Doc Miller in his office, handling paperwork. A steady stream of people came to ask his advice, not just about medical issues, but about personal problems, career decisions, and family matters. Each person, regardless of rank, received the same careful attention. Smith found himself moving closer to his screens, fascinated despite his training. He had been taught that military efficiency required strict adherence to rank and protocol. Yet here was a system that seemed to work better by ignoring those very rules. Final note of the day, Smith recorded, his antenna now completely twisted in knots. The human concept of Doc appears to be more than a simple medical title. It carries some form of authority based on, he struggled to find the right words, trust and respect rather than official rank. As he prepared his daily report for the council, Smith realized he was starting to question everything he had been taught about leadership and authority. The council had sent him to study this human anomaly, but instead, he found himself wondering if perhaps the humans had discovered something his own civilization had missed. What Smith didn't know was that his next day of observation would bring him face to face with Doc Miller in a way he never expected, and would challenge everything he believed about command, respect, and the true nature of authority. The explosion rocked the entire medical facility. Alarms blared as smoke poured from the experimental medical lab where human and alien scientists had been working together. Observer Smith's monitoring equipment showed him everything, but for the first time in his career, he forgot about taking notes. The scene unfolding before him was too intense. The lab had been testing new healing technologies, combining human and alien methods. Something had gone terribly wrong. Through the smoke, Smith could see both human and alien medical staff trapped inside. The facility's alien commander, High Captain Bronze, immediately began shouting orders through the emergency system, following standard Galactic Council protocol. But nobody moved. The situation didn't fit any standard emergency procedures. The alien staff froze, waiting for proper authorization chains to be established. The human soldiers hesitated, seeing their alien counterparts standing still. For a crucial moment, chaos reigned. Then Doc Miller walked into view. He took one look at the situation and started giving directions. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the panic like a laser. Teams of 4, mixed species. Humans know the building layout. Aliens know the tech. Work together. Move. To Smith's amazement, both humans and aliens responded instantly. The alien staff didn't even look to their commander for confirmation. Something in Doc's voice, his certainty, made them trust him without question. Doc Miller pointed at a young alien medical technician. "You understand the lab equipment better than anyone. Guide the first team." The technician, who would never normally act without orders from someone of their own species, immediately stepped forward and joined a group of human firefighters. Smith watched as Doc coordinated the rescue efforts. He treated injuries as teams brought people out, calmly directing both human and alien medical staff. When an alien doctor suggested a better way to treat plasma burns, Doc immediately adopted the new method. When a human private found a safer route into the lab, Doc quickly redirected teams to use it. High Captain Bronze stood to the side, his command authority completely ignored. Smith could see the captain's antenna twitching in confusion and anger. According to every rule of both human and alien military structure, Bronze should have been in charge. He had the highest rank present, but in this crisis, rank meant nothing. Experience, knowledge, and the ability to stay calm under pressure meant everything. The most remarkable moment came when Doc Miller himself started to enter the burning lab to reach a trapped scientist. A young alien medical intern grabbed his arm, an action that would have meant severe punishment in their culture. "Doctor, your respiratory system can't handle the smoke," the intern said. "I can breathe in there longer. Let me go." Instead of punishment, Doc Miller nodded, quickly gave the intern instructions, and sent them in with a rescue team. Minutes later, they emerged with the last survivor. As the emergency response teams got the situation under control, Smith noticed something extraordinary. The aliens who had worked under Doc's direction were looking at him differently. They had experienced something entirely new, leadership based not on rank or species, but on capability and trust. High Captain Bronze finally approached Doc Miller. By alien custom, Doc should have apologized for overstepping his authority. Instead, Bronze spoke first. "Your methods are unusual, Doctor, but they are effective. Perhaps we have something to learn from them." Smith sat back in his observation pod, his antenna now completely still with shock. He had just witnessed something unprecedented. An alien high captain acknowledging the value of human command methods. As he began to write his report, he struggled to find words that the council would understand. How could he explain that the most efficient response to the crisis had come from ignoring all the rules about rank and protocol? How could he make them understand that Doc's authority came not from any official position, but from the trust he had built with everyone around him? As the cleanup began, Smith watched Doc Miller checking on every person who had been involved, human and alien alike. The observer realized he was seeing something that would change not just his own understanding of leadership, but potentially the entire Galactic Council's approach to command structure. The question was, were they ready for such a change? The meeting room felt too small for the tension it contained. 5 members of the Galactic Council's leadership committee sat on one side of the table, their antennae rigid with disapproval. On the other side sat Doc Miller, looking surprisingly calm in his wrinkled white coat, along with the human base commander and observer Smith, who couldn't stop his antenna from twitching. "This is unacceptable," declared Council Leader Gold, waving a data tablet displaying footage from the lab accident. "You violated every protocol of chain of command. You gave orders to alien personnel without proper authority. You allowed lower ranks to question superior officers. You ignored High Captain Bronze's position completely." Doc Miller took a sip from his coffee mug, seeming more interested in its contents than the alien leader's anger. The base commander beside him tried not to smile. With respect, Doc Miller finally said, "I didn't give orders. I made suggestions that people chose to follow because they made sense at the time." The council members all blinked their inner eyelids rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation in their species. "Chose to follow." Council Member Silver almost squeaked the words. "Military personnel do not choose. They obey their superiors. Sometimes the person who knows what to do isn't the highest-ranking person in the room," Doc Miller replied simply. Observer Smith found himself nodding before he could stop himself. The council members turned their large eyes toward him, and he quickly tried to compose himself, but he had been ordered to report honestly, and after 15 days of watching Doc Miller, he had something to say. "Honored Council," Smith began, his voice shaking slightly, "I have observed that human medical facilities operate on a different kind of authority. He paused, searching for the right words. "They'd follow expertise over rank." "Impossible," Council Member Bronze interrupted. "How can they maintain order? How can they prevent chaos?" The base commander spoke up. "If I may, I'd like to show you something." He activated a holoscreen showing various clips from the past few months. Doc Miller treating a general's child while making the general wait his turn. Doc Miller listening to a private suggestion about improving emergency response times. Doc Miller teaching both human and alien medical staff, letting them question his methods and suggest improvements. "Look at the results," the commander said. "Our emergency response times have improved by 40%. Our survival rates are up. Cooperation between human and alien medical staff has never been better. All because we let people contribute based on what they know, not just their rank." The council members watched the footage in silence. Their antennae moved in patterns that suggested deep confusion and distress. But Council Leader Gold seemed to be struggling with the concept. "But how do you know who to listen to if not by their rank?" Doc Miller leaned forward. "You watch, you learn. You see who knows what they're talking about and who doesn't. Rank tells you about time served, but it doesn't always tell you who has the best solution to a problem." "I once had a young nurse correct my treatment plan," Doc continued, causing the council members to shift uncomfortably. "She had just read about a new procedure. If I had pulled rank and ignored her, the patient might have died. Instead, I listened, learned, and we saved a life together." Observer Smith suddenly understood something he had been missing in all his notes. "It's trust," he said aloud, causing everyone to look at him. "The humans have built a system based on earning trust rather than just giving orders." The council members huddled together, speaking in rapid, quiet tones. When they turned back, Council Leader Gold looked troubled but thoughtful. "This goes against thousands of years of military tradition," Gold said slowly. "But we cannot ignore the results. Perhaps we need to study this human approach more carefully." Doc Miller smiled and stood up. "Happy to help with that. But right now, I have patients waiting." Permission to be dismissed. The council members looked startled at this casual exit request, but nodded. As Doc left, Smith noticed several of them watching him with new interest. The humans hadn't just challenged their understanding of military command. They had shown them a completely different way of thinking about leadership itself. Observer Smith's vision blurred as he tried to focus on his monitoring screens. The pain in his chest had been getting worse for hours, but he ignored it. In his culture, showing weakness was unacceptable, especially for someone of his rank. He tried to continue his observation work, but suddenly the pain became unbearable. His antenna went limp as he collapsed. The emergency alert in his pod automatically activated. Within minutes, both human and alien medical teams arrived. Through his fading consciousness, Smith heard voices arguing about proper procedures for treating his species. Then a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Everyone step back and give him space," Doc Miller commanded, kneeling beside Smith. The observer wanted to protest. A human doctor treating an alien official without proper authorization would cause a diplomatic incident, but he couldn't speak. Doc Miller looked directly into Smith's eyes. "I know you're scared, and I know your culture says you shouldn't show it. But right now, I need you to forget about rank and protocol. Can you do that for me?" Something in Doc's calm, steady voice made Smith nod slightly. He watched as Doc turned to the alien medical officer present. "I need your knowledge here. His anatomy is different from humans. Guide my hands." The alien medical officer didn't hesitate. Together, they worked to stabilize Smith's condition. Doc asked questions, listened carefully, and adapted his treatment based on the alien officer's advice. No one mentioned that this collaboration broke about 15 different Galactic Council regulations. As Smith's pain eased and his vision cleared, he observed everything from a new perspective, as a patient rather than an observer. He saw how Doc Miller coordinated the human and alien medical staff, not by pulling rank, but by acknowledging everyone's expertise and combining it effectively. "Your heart equivalent was struggling with our planet's atmosphere," Doc explained later, sitting beside Smith's recovery bed. "It's a common problem for your species, but the symptoms look similar to minor fatigue, so it's often ignored until it becomes serious." Smith's antenna twitched with embarrassment. "I should have reported the symptoms to my superiors, who would have forwarded the concern to the appropriate medical authorities. Who would have then? And by that time," Doc interrupted gently, "you might have died." Sometimes the direct approach is better than proper procedure. A young human nurse entered with some medication. To Smith's surprise, she corrected Doc Miller about the dosage for alien patients. Even more surprising, Doc immediately checked her reference and agreed with her correction. "Thank you, Amy," he said warmly. "Always good to have someone watching out for mistakes." The nurse smiled and left, while Smith tried to process what he'd just seen. A superior not only accepting correction from a subordinate, but praising it. "You know," Doc said thoughtfully, checking Smith's vital signs, "I've been reading about your culture's medical history. You have some brilliant treatments we've never thought of. But I wonder how many other good ideas never get heard because the person who had them wasn't high enough rank to speak up." Smith thought about all the times he'd seen Doc Miller listen to suggestions from everyone: guards, cleaners, junior staff, anyone who might have useful input. He thought about how quickly problems got solved when people didn't have to wait for permission to offer solutions. "It's not just about medicine, is it?" Smith asked quietly. "This whole doc thing, it's about trusting people to contribute regardless of their rank." Doc Miller smiled. "Now you're getting it. Sure, rank has its place. Structure is important. But when you need help, do you care more about the number of stripes on someone's shoulder or whether they know how to save your life?" As if to prove his point, an alien maintenance worker poked his head into the room. "Doctor, I noticed the atmospheric controls in this section are slightly off. Might be affecting our alien patients. Want me to adjust them?" "Please do," Doc replied without hesitation, "and show our maintenance team how to monitor for that." Smith watched the exchange with new understanding. He had come to study human command structure, but he was learning something far more important: In his own moment of crisis, rank and protocol hadn't saved him. People working together had, led by someone who valued knowledge over authority. The realization hit him. This was what his reports had been missing. He hadn't just been observing a different command structure. He had been watching a completely different way of thinking about leadership and trust. Word spread through the Galactic Council like wildfire. At first, it traveled in whispers between junior officers, in encrypted messages between medical staff, in quiet conversations in break rooms across 100 alien worlds. The story of the human medical facility, its unusual doctor, and how Observer Smith's life had been saved by breaking nearly every rule in the book. In the Great Hall of the Council, Leader Gold faced a growing storm. Young alien medical officers were asking uncomfortable questions. Why couldn't they adopt some of the human methods? Why did every suggestion have to go through 17 levels of approval? Why couldn't expertise matter more than rank? "This is absurd," grumbled Council Member Bronze during an emergency session. 3 medical facilities have already reported junior staff making suggestions directly to their superiors without following proper channels. "And were the suggestions useful?" asked a younger council member named Steele, earning shocked looks from his colleagues. Steele had visited the human facility himself after hearing Smith's report. What he saw had changed him. "That's not the point." Bronze's antenna quivered with anger. "The point is proper procedure. The point is saving lives." Steele interrupted, causing several older council members to blink rapidly in shock. Observer Smith would have died if they had followed our proper procedures. Instead, a human doctor and our own medical staff worked together, ignored the rules, and saved him. The debate raged for hours. Reports kept coming in from across alien space. A young medical technician had prevented a viral outbreak by speaking up directly to her commander. A maintenance worker had solved a critical life support problem because his superior actually listened to his suggestion. The old system was cracking. Meanwhile, back at the human facility, Doc Miller continued his work, completely unaware of the political storm he had started. Observer Smith, now recovered but still officially on observation duty, watched him with new understanding. "You asked to speak with me," Doc said, entering Smith's observation room one quiet afternoon. Smith's antenna twitched nervously. "Yes, I received a message from the council today. They're sending teams to study human medical facilities across Earth. They want to understand this way of doing things." Doc raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a lot of fuss about nothing special. We just do what works." "That's just it," Smith said excitedly. "You don't even realize how different it is. In my culture, suggesting improvements means filing reports through proper channels. By the time approval comes, the patient might be dead. But here," he gestured at his screen showing various parts of the facility. "Here, good ideas can come from anyone, and they can be used immediately." "Makes sense to me," Doc shrugged. "Never understood why you'd ignore a good idea just because of who thought of it." Just then, Doc's communicator beeped. A young alien medical intern needed advice about treating the human patient. Smith watched in amazement as Doc walked the intern through the procedure, encouraging questions, praising good insights, and never once mentioning rank or protocol. Later that day, Smith received another council message. More facilities were reporting unauthorized improvements to their procedures. Some older commanders were calling it a rebellion. Younger officers were calling it progress. And at the center of it all, though he didn't know it, was the simple human concept of Doc. "You know what the really interesting thing is," Smith said to Doc before he left that evening. "It's spreading beyond medical facilities now. Engineering teams, research stations, even military units, they're all starting to question the old ways. They're starting to think that maybe, just maybe, good ideas matter more than rank." Doc Miller just smiled and headed off to his next patient. Behind him, on Smith's screens, the observer could see the future unfolding. Young aliens walking more confidently, speaking up more often, looking at their superiors not with fear, but with hope that they might actually be heard. The revolution wasn't happening with weapons or warfare. It was happening with simple questions. What if we tried this? Could this work better? May I suggest something? Questions that would have been unthinkable just months ago, now spreading across the galaxy, changing thousands of years of tradition one small suggestion at a time. 6 months had passed since Observer Smith's near-death experience. The small human medical facility that had started it all now hosted visitors from across the galaxy. Alien medical officers, military commanders, and council representatives came to watch, learn, and sometimes shake their heads in disbelief at how it all worked. Doc Miller still treated his patients the same way he always had, though now he occasionally glanced up to find alien observers taking notes on his every move. Today, he was teaching a mixed group of human and alien medical students, something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Remember, he told them, checking on a patient's bandages, medicine isn't about who has the most authority. It's about who has the right answer at the right time. Sometimes that's me. Sometimes it's you. Sometimes it's the patient themselves. Observer Smith, who had chosen to stay on as a permanent liaison between humans and the council, watched the scene through his monitors with satisfaction. His own report had helped start this change, and now he was documenting its effects. The biggest change had come 3 months ago, when the Galactic Council had formally recognized what they called the Doc Principle, the radical idea that expertise and experience could sometimes outweigh formal rank. They didn't completely abandon their hierarchical system, but they opened doors that had been sealed for thousands of years. "Your shift ended an hour ago," Doc said, entering Smith's observation room. "You're as bad as I am about working late." Smith's antenna twitched with amusement. "I wanted to finish watching the new alien medical team. Did you see how their commander actually asked a junior nurse for advice about human anatomy? 6 months ago, that would have been a serious offense." "Times change," Doc replied, settling into a chair. "Though I hear not everyone's happy about it." That was true. The conservative members of the council still protested what they saw as the breakdown of proper order, but the results were hard to argue with. Medical facilities that adopted the Doc Principle reported better survival rates, faster problem solving, and happier staff. The changes were spreading beyond medicine too. A commotion on one of Smith's screens caught their attention. In the emergency room, a young alien doctor was treating a human patient. Instead of waiting for orders or checking protocols, she was confidently giving directions to both human and alien staff. On her coat, beneath her official rank insignia, she wore a small pin with the word Doc. "That's new," Doc Miller commented, noticing the pin. "It's becoming popular among alien medical staff," Smith explained. "It's their way of saying they follow the new way, valuing ideas over rank, listening to everyone, leading through trust rather than authority." The young alien doctor finished treating her patient successfully, her team working smoothly together regardless of species or rank. On another screen, in the break room, human and alien medical staff sat together, freely discussing ways to improve their procedures. No one filed reports through proper channels. No one waited for permission to speak. "You know what the best part is?" Smith said, his antenna moving in patterns of joy. "Yesterday, an alien engineering facility reported using the Doc Principle to solve a critical problem. They said they asked everyone for ideas, from the highest commander to the newest maintenance worker. They found their solution in half the usual time." Doc Miller stood up, stretching tiredly. "Well, I'm glad something good came from all this observation business. Though I still think you all make too much fuss about it. We just do what works." As Doc left the room, Smith watched him go on the monitors. He smiled, remembering how confused he had been when he first started observing this human phenomenon. Now he understood. The power of Doc had never been about rank or authority. It had been about something much simpler. The idea that good leadership means listening to everyone, that trust works better than fear, and that sometimes the best ideas can come from anywhere. On his main screen, Smith could see the young alien doctor with her doc pin, confidently leading her team. In other parts of the facility, more alien medical staff wore similar pins. Across the galaxy, the change was spreading. One pin, one idea, one person at a time. The humans hadn't just taught them a new way to run a medical facility. They had shown them a new way to think about leadership itself. And it had all started because some aliens couldn't understand why everyone listened to someone called Doc.